So I first started work in the 1960s and found statistics was a rather bitty subject. The normal distribution was of central importance. I felt that we were sort of at the top of a mountain where different methods were like little streams coming along. And I was keen that they would coalesce so the subject would become simpler. And this hasn't happened in quite the way I imagined, but things did happen rather attractively. So in the 1960s, at the top of the mountain, was that if your data didn't come from a normal distribution, then you tended to try and do a bodge. You took square roots or you transformed data in some other way. And then Bayesian statistics was sitting a bit apart in the mountain. It was very attractive in its methodology, but it only solved rather simple problems, sort of like the 1 or 2 sample t-test. That was okay, but most of my problems as an applied statistician were more complicated than this. And similarly, non-parametric or distribution-free methods try to take away the assumption of normality. But again, they tended to do this only for small problems. And significance tests were very, very popular with a lot of people. But again, the significance tests were tricky, partly because some users often confused the word significant in terms of statistical significance with practical importance. And often the significance tests weren't of much practical importance. So what then happened in the 1970s was very attractive to me. And this was generalized linear models. Suddenly, you could do the same sort of methods of analysis, and you could do that for very many distributions and therefore for different types of data. The second thing that happened in the 1970s, which I found very enjoyable, was that statistics became more interactive. You didn't just try to solve the problem and hope that the next day when you got your results, they would have your full solution. You worked step by step and you learned as you went along. Remember, this was before we had personal computers. And so that I found was a very attractive aspect of the work now. However, the generalized linear models all assume data at a single level. They couldn't cope with multiple levels of data. So they couldn't handle data where you had values at the person level and also at the household level. You worked at a single level of data. The change in the 1980s carried on this modeling approach and introduced a thing called REML, which enabled you to fit similar sorts of models to multiple levels of data. Initially, that was just for the normal distribution, but they've since been generalized. And that enabled you to cope with the idea that data close together, perhaps from within the same household, would be more similar than data further apart, say from another village. And that suddenly helped with another problem. That was that spatial data often had a similar correlation structure. We were really coming down from the mountains now. You notice the emphasis on modeling here, and that's still my main world. However, the other thing that happened quietly is that with the advance in computing, suddenly Bayesian methods advanced dramatically. That's major, and it continues to provide an extremely useful methodology. Some people worry about Bayesian methods, that it's a different philosophy, but I think that's less important than the fact it can now consistently solve a very wide range of problems. And then suddenly we had Bootstrap. And Bootstrap opened the door to not assuming a distribution. So distribution-free methods are now extremely popular, and that's correct. Oh, and then we had regression trees and neural networks as well. So as we got to the 90s and the noughties, I realized there were lots and lots of methods. They were useful for a range of different problems. They're all now seemingly encapsulated, and we call them machine learning. And isn't that exciting?